How's it going, everyone? Kim Blacktooth here, and welcome to the very first episode of my Gwent the Witcher card game tutorial series. The basics. So this video is aimed at very new people who have not played Gwent before, and that includes the Witcher 3 Gwent. I'm going to go over the objective of Gwent and the rules, and then a natural progression of what a match looks like so you can understand. And so hopefully you'll get a nice grasp of the game after this video is ended. And I'm also going to show you how the game is presented to you and give you a few key terminology so you understand when people talk about Gwent what they mean. Okay? So a match of Gwent is split up into 3 rounds. To win, you've simply got to win 2 of the 3 rounds. So it's a best of 3 scenario. The player who has the highest strength on their side of the board when a round ends wins that round. It's as simple as that. A round ends when both players have chosen to pass, meaning they get no more turns, they can no longer place cards down, but it is voluntary. The player gets to choose when they want to pass, unless they've run out of cards. If they've run out of cards in their hand, then they can't play anymore and it's an automatic pass. When a round ends, all the cards on the board will go into the graveyard, which is where they'll stay. Now there are exceptions to this. Some abilities allow cards to stay on the board. Some abilities allow you to pull cards from the graveyard back onto the board, but to keep it simple, for the most part, cards that are on the board when a round ends get put to the graveyard, and then a new round starts and you've got to start placing cards to build up your strength to win the second round. You'll be dealt 10 cards from your deck at the beginning of the match, and these are the only cards you're going to be issued for the entire match. There is no automatic card draw in this game, like most other card games. There are, however, many different card abilities which allow you to pull cards from your deck, from your graveyard in many different ways, and we'll go into that later as well. So basically, the 10 cards you get at the start are going to be the 10 cards that you have to win with. You'll then go to the redraw phase, where you get to redraw 3 of your 10 card opening hand before the match begins. You want to use this opportunity to redraw bad cards that don't gel well with the overall strategy that you've got, and possibly duplicate cards which are bad to be in your hand because they'll come out in other ways, and just to form an overall strategy with the 10 cards that you have in your hand. A coin toss will take place to see who goes first. Now there is an exception, but I'm not going to go into that for now. So both players now take turns placing a single card onto the board from their hand. This goes back and forth, placing 1 card each until the round ends. And remember, a round can end when either both players have chosen to pass, where they get no more turns, or they've run out of cards. If a player chooses to pass, they forfeit all their turns this round, and the opponent can place as many cards they want from their hand. When the opponent has decided he doesn't want to play any more cards, he will pass and that will end the round. So at this point you might be thinking this particular rule is a bit strange. The opponent gets to place as many cards as they want, surely that means they'll easily beat your strength. And while that is true, they probably could easily do it. If they place too many cards down to win round 1, they're not going to have enough cards to win round 2 and 3. So it's all about distributing your cards in order to win 2 rounds. And sometimes it's better to lose rather than wasting so many cards trying to get a win, because then you'll lose the game. All the cards on the battlefield at the end of the round will be moved to the graveyard with some exceptions like I mentioned. And the winner of the round plays the first card in the next round. And you win 2 out of these 3 rounds and you've won the match. So there's quite a lot of rules there, and I did talk for quite a long time, so now I'm going to actually play a match of Gwent, the Witcher card game, and compare it to the rules so you know what's happening at each stage and how a game sort of naturally progresses. But before we do that, I just want to talk about the board, because there's some areas of the board that you will need to know about, just so that you know what's going on when cards move around the battlefield. So this is the board, and there's a couple of key aspects I just want to quickly draw your attention to so you know what's going on. At the top you've got the opponent's hand. He's got 10 cards and a leader card, which we'll go into later. And at the bottom you've got 10 cards and a leader card of your own. On the left hand side you get to see whose turn it is. That coin will tell you. The coin indicates it's Scoia'tael's, which is the player at the bottom. In the top right and the top bottom you've got your graveyard indicated by the skull icon, and next to that the deck. A lot of abilities pull cards out of the deck, so that will be quite useful. In the top left we have the crown symbol. The crown symbol indicates how many rounds you've won. So at the minute nobody's won any rounds. But when half a crown lights up, it means you've won 1 round out of the 3. And if both sides of the crown light up, it means you've won the game because you've won 2 out of 3. So in the middle of the board, you've got the battlefield, where you actually place cards, and it's split up into the opponent's side of the battlefield, indicated by the red, and your side of the battlefield, indicated by the blue. So this battlefield is split up into 3 rows, and both players have a melee row, indicated by the sword. They have a ranged row, indicated by a crossbow, and a siege row, indicated by a catapult. Now, these rows are quite important to strategy. A lot of cards can only be placed on certain rows. This is something you want to consider when you're building a deck, because certain buffs and certain debuffs and certain abilities only affect certain rows. So when you're building your deck, it's quite important. But we're not going to get into that now. But certain cards will be placed on certain rows. So just to the left of the battlefield, you've got a set of buffing glyphs, and on the right side you've got a set of debuffing glyphs. We'll get to talk about this a little bit more when we talk about cards and card abilities in the next video as well. On the left, each row has a strength value, you can see, with all the noughts because no cards are played, and at the very top and bottom you've got the total strength of your side of the battlefield. Remember that the total strength of your side of the battlefield is what could win you the round. So whoever has the highest total strength on their side of the battlefield when the round ends will win that round. So I think we're about ready for an actual game now. I'm going to commentate through it in relation to the rules, whose turn it is, how they're doing in strength, and why they're deciding to pass and all that. So at the beginning of a match you get to see the opponent's leader card and what deck they're playing, which just helps for strategy purposes. Now both players are going to draw 10 cards from their deck and go into the redraw phase, where you can redraw 3 of those cards, and you want to use this opportunity again to try and get rid of bad cards that you don't want in your hand for whatever reason. On the left, the coin's going to flip and tell us who goes first, indicated by the colour and the icon. So the blue player goes first, which is at the bottom, the monster player, and he gets to place 1 card. So a lot of cards have abilities, and that's where all these extra cards come from, but he's only placing 1 card down. And now it's the Northern Realms player, person at the top. He gets to place 1 card, which brought another card out as well. And back to the monsters. So they're going back and forth, just placing 1 card down, trying to build up their total strength, as you can see on the left here. So at the minute, the monster player has 30 strength on the melee row and 0 on ranged and siege. And the Northern Realms player has 4 on the melee and 4 on the ranged and 0 on the siege. Okay, so as you can see, this sort of frost effect on the melee is a debuff. It's a buff for the monster player at the bottom, but it's a debuff for the opponent. So that's why playing cards on certain rows is strategically important, because if the top player wasn't in that frost, his strength would be a lot higher at the minute. So at the minute, you can see on the bottom, the monster player, his total strength on his side of the board is 38. You can see it down here, his total strength, and how that's distributed between the different rows. The Northern Realms player at the top, however, he's only got a total strength of 9, and you can see how that's distributed as well.
I'll do what I can.
So the Northern Realms player was able to get rid of the debuff, and now it is in the lead in total strength. But the monster player is about to put that debuff straight back on, so the monster player will be back in the lead by quite a considerable amount, actually. So the monster player at the bottom has a total strength of 38. You can see how it's distributed between the different rows as well. 30 on melee and 8 on siege. And the Northern Realms player at the top has only 13 strength. So 13 and 38 is quite a considerable gap. It could be a bigger gap, but this is reasonable enough for the Northern Realms player to think that he can't really bridge that gap and get into the lead without using too many cards. And remember, you don't want to place all your cards down. You don't want to put everything in round 1, because you want some cards for round 2 and round 3 to make sure that you win 2 of the 3 rounds. So the Northern Realms player is going to voluntarily pass, which means the monster player can place as many cards as he wants to now. However, the monster player is already in the lead, so he doesn't need to play anything else, so he's just going to pass as well. So after both players have passed, the end of the round, the monster player has won, as indicated by the little half a crown icon that he got, and all cards on the board are going to get wiped into their respective graveyards. Okay? So the board is now reset. Both players have 0 total strength, but the monster player won the previous round, as indicated by the crown, so they have to play the first card on this second round. And so now it basically repeats. They each take turns playing a card to try and get the highest strength. Okay? Now, because the monster has already won, it's up to him. He's got a lot more initiative. He's allowed to dictate this sort of second round a little bit. Now, both players can still pass whenever they want, but because the Northern Realms player at the top has already lost a round, he really can't afford to pass. If the opponent passes the Northern Realms player at the top, the monster player can just play all his cards and win the second round for sure. So this is really good for the monster player at the bottom, because he gets to try and make the opponent waste cards, you know. So it seems quite good. He's actually getting a reasonable amount of strength now. So it's up to the monster player how he wants to progress. He did a very good choice there, got rid of 3 of the opponent's cards, and was quite a devastating thing to the opponent, a devastating move. So the Northern Realms player at the top has to win this to stay in the game, because it's 2 out of 3, and this is the second round. So that was a spy effect, one of the type of cards that can pull cards from your deck. And it also allowed the opponent to draw 1 card from their deck too. So they've got a few extra cards to play with, and Northern Realms is in the lead, but only by slightly, and he still can't pass even though he's in the lead, because then the monster player at the bottom could just put down all his cards and win easily. So he's forcing the Northern Realms player to start wasting a few cards, which is really, really important.
With pleasure.
Okay, so the strength total is 78 for Northern Realms and for 44 for the monsters. However, this card is going to make a big difference and might bring the monsters into the lead, which it does, but only narrowly. But the monster has no longer got any cards in his hand. So the monster, on his next turn, will automatically pass. And now the Northern Realms player has no cards in his hand, so he will automatically pass. So both players have run out of cards and are forced to pass. So whatever the strength is will be what it is. So Northern Realms win the second round. Unfortunately, they have no cards for the next round. So usually it'd be a tie. However, monster deck players have a special ability where they get to keep 1 card on the board, which actually managed to win in the third round. So that's the end of the match, and we saw that the monster player has won. It gives you a little rundown on how the strength was distributed between the 3 rounds. So first round we saw that monsters won by a lead of 38. Against 13. On the second round, the Northern Realms won of 104 strength to 66. However, Northern Realms didn't have any cards in their hand. Neither did monsters, but monsters knew they had an ability to keep a card on the board, which actually was useful and kept the card on the board and give them 8 strength to win to 0. Okay. So that's it. Hopefully that's given you a clue on how a Gwent match is played. Now, one thing I didn't really go over in this video is much strategy, so it may have looked overly simplistic to you. Each player just gets to play a card. However, there is a lot of strategy in this game. It mostly comes down to managing your cards, making your opponent mismanage, making them waste their cards at certain points. Cards have abilities, and knowing which cards to place down at different points in the game, for what reason, to protect them, to strive for the strength, to make your opponent pass. So you can place down as many cards as you want. There's a couple of different really good strategies. So in the next video, we're going to look at the types of cards that are available to you, building a deck, and what kind of abilities those particular cards have. Okay? Thanks for watching, everyone, and take care. I'll see you next time.